everyone. My name's Hannah Landers. I'm the Assistant Director of Career Services here in Pamplin. Thanks again for joining. We're so excited to talk all things interview today. We have several wonderful panelists with us today to talk a little bit about their perspective and some advice for you all. So I'm going to get started with some introductions. Krista, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Krista. I'm actually in the Pamplin College of Business as a career advisor. I've been here since February, and I'm super excited to talk all about interviewing today.
Awesome. All right, Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Shreve. I'm a recruiter with PwC. I've been with the firm just under 4 years now, and I am located in Charlotte, North Carolina, but recruit for all locations and I'm excited to be here.
Welcome, welcome. And Emma.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My name's Emma. I am a recruiter with AlphaSights out of New York City. I recruit for a number of different schools on the East Coast, Virginia Tech being one of them. So, super excited to lend you some insight today.
Yeah, there's some really good perspectives today. We're going to ask some questions that we have prepared, but for our student attendees, please feel free to put questions in the chat as we're talking, and we would love to get our participants' insights on your questions live as well. All right, well, with that, I'm just going to jump right in because we have quite a few things to cover today. Rachel, I'm going to start with you. The question that we love to hate is the classic, tell me about yourself, right at the beginning. How would you recommend a student answer this question?
Absolutely, a great question. And it's not as scary as everyone thinks. I think the biggest thing is to really have like your elevator pitch prepared. It's quick snippet of like who you are, your name, the school that you go to, if you're not already on campus talking to this person, but also like your class year, your major, anything that you're involved in, where you're from, any quick interests, those types of things. But also at the end of that, once you've kind of told a little bit more about yourself, tell if it's a recruiter and anyone that's in relation to a job, tell them what you're looking for. If you're looking for an internship in this type of career path, make sure that you share that as well. So just make it short and sweet. I'd say anywhere no more than a minute. We kind of have that as like our maximum time frame for how to talk about yourself. So that's what I would say. Just kind of have your elevator pitch ready. Hopefully
That's
that's
perfect.
helpful.
And I guess a follow-up question to that, we often get asked, should they include any personal information, like I'm interested in sports or, I do this on the side or anything like that, or should it be strictly education and career goals?
I think a little bit of both, personally. I mean, that is my preference. I think the education piece and career goals, that piece is obviously huge. But if you can share something personal about yourself, I think that goes a long way because I remember a student asking me or mentioning about an interest in fantasy football in their initial conversation with me. And I love fantasy football, even though my team's doing horrible this year. That stuck with me. So then we had something to like communicate about because we had something in common. So if you have things personally that you want to bring up that you're passionate about, I think that can also go a long way. Yes.
Awesome, great. Emma, for you, have you had students share something personal, anything that sticks out that was like a great thing to connect on or anything like that in an interview?
Yeah, I have. I've interviewed a number of students recently who have relocated to the United States, and I think them sharing their story about that always goes a long way for me. I think that shows a lot about your hunger and your drive. So, of course, that directly applies to your success in a role. I also interviewed somebody today who was also a graduate from University of Wisconsin, like me, and was actually in the same sorority as me. So we were immediately able to just connect over that common ground. So I think tiny snippets of just kind of like personal stories are always great. And I think being able to kind of tie your whole about me summary to the role that you're applying for, too, kind of at the end, is also always a nice touch.
Awesome. So, Krista, I'm going to ask you this one. We also hear from a lot of younger students, and maybe they're applying for their first role. How should they tailor their elevator pitch, the tell me about yourself, if they haven't yet had an internship or job experience?
Yeah, so they'd have to lean in on their projects and their leadership experiences, maybe any part-time positions, and just really tone in on what relevant experiences they have and how it ties into that role in that company. So I'd reiterate everything that everyone else is saying, right? But also keep it memorable. It's okay to tie in some part-time work and projects you've done, but certainly have your background, your academics, the primary focus of the elevator pitch.
Awesome. Okay. So on this theme of like how to stand out, how to be memorable, Rachel, I'll come back to you. What is your favorite question that you like to be asked at the end of an interview by candidates?
Well, usually my questions are centered a little bit more around PwC. Students are always
Mhm.
asking me about PwC. So I love the question as to like why I came to PwC and what keeps me at PwC. So kind of like a two-pronged question. I think that's good. I like it because then I get to talk about some different like volunteering things that we do in the community, which is something that I'm very passionate about. So it's something that I think goes a long way. And it also allows us to kind of talk a little bit more if they're interested in volunteering or giving back in the community so we can connect a little bit further upon that. But really, like my biggest advice is just asking like any interviewer questions about themselves. People love to talk about themselves at the end of the day. So do your research ahead of time on your interviewers, see if there's something that you have in common or if you like have an interest in, prepare that as a question and ask that to them at the end, I would say.
Yeah, I love that advice. It really is like an automatic connection. If you can
Yeah.
get someone talking about themselves and then you kind of pump them up, that's like a great way to connect.
Yeah.
My favorite question that I've been asked in an interview is the same one, the what keeps you here? Like you just get to
Yeah.
kind of brag on your company and it's just a great question. So that's awesome. Emma, same question to you. What do you like to be asked in an interview?
I also find it really easy to answer questions about my own experience at my company. So, a question that I was asked recently was, how did you kind of bridge the gap between your experience in college and now your experience in AlphaSights? What were some difficulties you faced, and how did you tackle those? So, that was super easy for me to just kind of like relate to the student I was interviewing with. I do only early career interviewing. So, all of these people are college students or recent graduates. And I love talking about the transition from college life to the professional world. So I really love that. I think, kind of echoing what Rachel said, it's very easy for interviewers to kind of talk about their own experience. And all of us are, of course, at companies that we really love and we're recruiters. We're super passionate about building relationships with students. So, yeah, I would say something similar.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something you touched on is important. If a student knows who they're interviewing with, they can look up that person on LinkedIn and they can ask even better questions because you might know Emma's background and her education and ask some questions about how she bridged that gap. So I love that question. Krista, I'm going to come to you. Are there other questions that you recommend students ask so that they can gather information that's helpful to them in the interview process?
Yeah, so when you're able to ask questions in an interview, that's yet another chance for you to show you've done your research and to make a connection with the recruiter. So don't waste that time. I would say don't have one of your questions be, what is this company? What is this position? Because that's something you should already know. But use that to show you've done your research. Maybe there's a certain initiative or project the company has done. Maybe the recruiter is also dabbling in something you're also interested in because maybe you connected with them on LinkedIn. So, personalized questions, but also questions that really show your research are the best ones to ask.
Okay, so let's talk about another common question. I think it's becoming less common, but I know it's still asked. Rachel, how would you recommend answering the strengths and weaknesses question?
The most fun one that everyone is
Mhm.
very scared of, including myself. I don't even like to ask this question because I think it puts everybody on the spot and makes them uncomfortable. But if you do get this question, and it will happen at some point, really like strengths, easy. Talk about the things that you're most, you really think that you're best at, or you've been given feedback about, like list them out. I think the toughest part is the weaknesses portion of that question, and that's okay. Everybody does have weaknesses. No matter how perfect you are at your job or internship, whatever it is, we all have weaknesses. So you want to answer it honestly, but really turn it in a positive manner. That's, I think, the key to this question is yes, I have a weakness, but here's how I handle it. Here's how I make it into a positive. So, like, for example, myself, I'm pretty detail oriented, which sometimes then I can get a little stuck in the details sometimes versus seeing that big picture aspect of things. But in turn, as I'm planning events, planning different things, that attention to detail pays off because then I don't have a lot of hiccups along the way because I've thought of all the details. So, just as an example, that's something that I would recommend, just really turning those weaknesses into a positive for the interviewer to see.
Yeah, definitely. And talk about how you're continuing to improve is a big one
Yes.
because especially this level of candidate, you're coming out of college or you're still in college, it's natural that you would still be working on some things. And so I know recruiters like to hear this is what I'm struggling with, but here's how I've already worked to address that. So that's perfect advice. Okay. I just got a question in the chat. Ooh, when should a student bring up questions or concerns about the offer? So we're still in the interview process. Should they ask about start date, location? Should they be asking about salary? When are those questions appropriate in the interview? Emma, I'm going to go to you.
Well, I know in New York, we must post all of our like salary information in our job posting. So I don't typically get a ton of questions. But honestly, I think it's okay for a first round interview. I think a first round interview is really where you're getting kind of like that initial surface level interaction with someone from the company. And I honestly think it's better to ask a first round interviewer those kind of like touchy questions or questions that can seem a little bit awkward as opposed to like a final round interviewer who may be like a VP, your potential boss, things like that. So I think start date, pay range, all of those things are definitely okay to ask interviewers as long as you're doing it in a tasteful way, leading with respect, everything like that.
Okay. I wonder if you could give us an example of the leading with respect on as far as like location, because that's
Yeah.
a common one, and I want to make sure we're
Yeah.
clear as far as what that looks like.
Exactly. So, for a little bit of context, AlphaSights is located in the US in both New York and San Francisco. So, people from all over the country will apply for this role, and a lot of people will ask me about relocation assistance. So, this is, of course, like very difficult for college students. A lot of people are moving on their own, funding their own move. It's really, really tough. So, I've had so many people be really, I think, just like thoughtful with how they word it. Like, oh, I know I took a look at your website. I didn't see anything exactly on relocation assistance, but wanted to ask you, since you, of course, have the most knowledge, do you guys have a package for relocation assistance? I would be moving across country for this role and just wanted to have all the information set before I get to the point where I need to make a decision. I think something worded like that, where it shows that you did your research, you're not just kind of going in blind and just trying to see like what the company can do for you. I think that's kind of the perfect way to do it. And if you are curious about those things, like before your interview, just make sure you've done all the digging you can, and then you can send those questions over to your interviewer. I think that's totally okay.
That's perfect. Yeah, thank you, Emma, for that specific
Of course.
example because that's so helpful.
Yeah.
And I just want to reiterate the doing your research aspect, the looking up and trying to find an answer before reaching out, even though, and Emma sharing this is totally okay to reach out. It's still part of your interview. So it's important to show those critical thinking skills and problem solving and make sure you do whatever you can to find the information before reaching out to the recruiter. Okay, so I know every company is different. Rachel, I would love your take on this question as well.
Absolutely. And it is truly different across the board. So I will say before coming into PwC and professional services, I worked in industry and we would ask those questions on like the recruiter phone screen, initial conversation with the candidate right out of the gates. What's your salary expectation? When can you start? Like, what's your preferred location? All of that. So it depends on the company. So I say, ask whenever you're comfortable. Now, for example, at PwC, we ask for the location preference that your top location preference on the application. So we're reaching out to you if the location matches up for that opportunity. So you don't have to worry about that too much with us. Now, in terms of like the salary and other details like that, all of that with us comes at the time of an offer. So there's another recruiter, like I'm on the front end working with candidates. We have business recruiters who, during the interview process, they're handling that and then extending the offers and those monetary details. So it is different with each company. So It's really like for us, I would want you to ask about salary, relocation, those types of things once that offer has been extended or when you're in the like final stages of the interview. But in industry, we talked about it in that first conversation. So I just kind of feel it out.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, there's some variations here. I think also a takeaway for our student attendees is if you lead with respect and kindness, you can't go too wrong. If you're asking too early, I assume you'll get kindly diverted and, told to hold off until later in the process. So that's the most important thing. But obviously, if you're interviewing for one of these two companies, now you have inside scoop on how that's going to look. So, Krista, I'm going to come to you. Another situation that we see in other companies is students will be asked to share their desired salary pretty early on. Any tips for navigating that conversation? You don't want to go too high or too low. How would you recommend a student navigate that?
Yeah, so a wrong way to go about that is to throw out a number that you would like, but not necessarily backed up by research. So the best way to go about it is to just do a lot of research in the area for similar positions. So if you're looking into a financial consulting role and they give you a ballpark salary, you should also be looking into other financial analyst roles in the New York area, if that's the area you're in. And when you are negotiating that salary, that's when you would bring in that research. So an example of how you would approach it is, hi, I would like to talk about, the salary negotiation based on my research and certain jobs in the area. This is what I found. Can this be negotiated upon? So that's a good way to go about it. Just make sure you bring a lot of research to the table.
Perfect answer. Yeah. And I mean, I'm going to probably float this multiple times during this call, but coming to meet with us is a good start. We can show you some data. Career Services can walk you through what's common for positions like the one you're applying for. So yeah, thank you, Krista. Okay, we just got another question in the chat. This student would like to know about other aspects of the interview process. So are there assessments, and is the interview recorded or analyzed is the full question. So Rachel, I'll start with you.
Great question. So our interviews are not recorded, analyzed, anything like that. It's just a one-on-one with the interviewer. Now we do have an assessment portion of the process. So at PwC, for any entry-level internship or full-time opportunity, you do apply, and then within a few hours, you're automatically sent an email asking you to complete. It's a behavioral assessment. It takes like 15 to 20 minutes maximum. It's not too painful. Like I said, it's those behavioral, strongly agree, strongly disagree. How do you handle these types of like a conflict or different situation with a team? Those types of questions. So with those, I just say I do see a lot of companies use them. So definitely, if you get one of those emails, take them relatively quickly. Don't sit on that for a long period of time, and make sure that when you take it, you don't have distractions or anything like that, and you can like fully focus on the assessment. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Emma, same question. Are there other aspects that they should be aware of to your interview process?
Of course. So, very similar to PwC, when a candidate submits their resume, they are automatically sent out 2 extra exercises that they will need to complete in order for their entire application to be viewed. So, that is a behavioral assessment, and it is also a AI interview exercise. So, it's similar to a higher view, but we have our AI named Sarah conduct a conversation with our candidates, and they'll talk a little bit about their experience in college, why they picked their school, very behavioral questions, just to get a better sense of who our candidate is overall, since it sometimes can be hard to get a read on candidates who are so early talent. A lot of times for interns, they don't have a ton of professional experience. So we want to know who exactly you are before we make our selection just based off of your resume. Then after all of that's submitted, we see, is this person going to be a really great fit? Then we have a first round, and we also have more of like a case study rounds too. So I know that's more kind of like in the depths of the process, but nothing is recorded for us either. Just that like AI conversation will have a video recording, but besides that, nothing is recorded, and it's just one-on-one with you and your interviewer.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's super insightful. We do get a lot of questions about higher view and, those kinds of interviews. Can you talk about your best tips for preparing for that? Because it's a little different than what a lot of students are familiar with.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for those higher view AI tools, definitely be super familiar with what's on your resume. You want your answers to directly match up what your interviewer will be comparing with your resume. I would say do in depth research on the company. You never know if this AI tool is going to ask you, so talk me through the day to day of someone at this company. I've seen that question a ton. And I think overall, be super confident in your about me statement. Have a couple of stories that you can bring to the higher view just to lean on in case you get asked anything behavioral. Maybe talk to me about a time when you were on a team and you didn't see eye to eye with someone, or talk to me about a roadblock that you've had in a previous role. Just kind of stories like that. I always recommend going in with a couple just because I feel like it makes candidates feel a little bit more comfortable, just kind of like going into things and not really knowing what to expect. Those are my top tips, but I think just go in with confidence. You know the answers to all of these questions that these tools are asking. So they can be tough, but I've seen people definitely like after a few tries really get adjusted to them.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the have some stories prepared. You can't prepare for every question. It's just impossible. So having some information about yourself, that's where you can be the expert, really helps, especially because a lot of these behavioral questions can be somewhat vague. I mean, they're that way on purpose, so you
Right.
can kind of plug and play what you have. So I love that advice.
Absolutely.
Rachel, I'm going to come back to you. Another question in the chat. This student wants to know, do the results of behavioral assessments have a big impact on whether a candidate will get an interview?
Great question. So they are part of the application process. Yes, we do take into account your resume, your application results, how you fill it out, the application, all of that. So yes, it doesn't, I will say it doesn't directly make the ultimate decision for you, but it is part of the full review of your application. So yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Krista, I'm going to come to you with another question from the chat. The student wants to know if we get an internship, but we're still waiting to hear back from another offer. How do we politely tell them that we need longer until we can accept?
Yeah, so communication is so key when you have an offer. So make sure you don't make any rash decisions before talking with everyone through. I would respectfully ask for an extension, or if you already do have an extension, know that you're going to have a date to accept that offer. And you're going to have to make a decision then. Do you want to stick with that position and accept that offer, knowing that you'd have to decline any further interviews? Or would you rather take your shots at other interviews and respectfully decline that offer? But regardless, you'd have to make that kind of decision. Just approaching that conversation with empathy towards the recruiter and their time, having a bunch of respect, and communicating with them prior to that deadline is all key in that situation.
Yeah, that's great advice. Rachel, it looked like maybe you were nodding along. Anything to
Yes.
add?
This is a hot topic for us, specifically like at PwC. I know like we are one of the big four, so pretty much all of the big four firms are on very similar time frames too. So what we just really ask is be transparent as much as you can with your recruiter. So like if I'm working with you as a Virginia Tech student, let me know if you're interviewing other places or you get an offer, what your deadline is. Be transparent, that don't be afraid to. It's not taboo whatsoever. Like share that information with us. Ultimately, it might help you in the process. It can sometimes allow us to speed up the process faster for you. So definitely just be as transparent right from the get-go. The last thing we want to do is really like invest a lot of time into a student and then we're getting to the offer process and all of a sudden the rug's pulled out from under us and they're like, "Oh, thanks, but I accepted an offer at your competitor. Appreciate your time." When we've invested so much in you, it kind of leaves a bad taste in our mouth. So I would say just be as transparent and open throughout the process as possible.
Yeah, it's so important. And I mean, this is the first time for most college students where your options are not laid out with one specific timeline. And that does make it really challenging. But you have to understand on the recruiter side how much time and again and resources they're investing in you all. So when you make a decision to accept an offer, you want to be really sure about that. And you can't compare it to the unknown. I mean, you could keep applying forever, but ultimately one day you'll have to choose a specific job. So communicating openly, asking for an extension, and ultimately, please come talk to us. If you're in a situation where you're unsure, you're in a pickle, please come talk to Career Services and we'll help you navigate as best we can. All right. Let's see. I'm going to start with you, Krista. The student would like to know, is the STAR method the preferred format for answering interview questions? Can you talk a little bit about what that is for maybe our listeners who don't know?
Yeah, so short answer, yes. We've actually had some companies, more than one, specifically ask students in interviews to answer questions using the STAR method. And it's not just an organizational tool, but it's great to be organized, but it also shows, hey, you know what the STAR method is, you're really putting in that effort. So if you don't know what the STAR method is, it's just a really effective way to organize yourself in interviews so you're not going all over the place in your answers. So STAR, the S is the situation, get the situation at the beginning out of the way. And what was the task, right? So if you were asked, show me about a time you demonstrated leadership, you would get the situation out of the way. Your task is maybe you were working on a class assignment, right? You're going to go through the S and the T kind of quickly, but the best way to go about the STAR method is to focus on the action and the results, right? That's the A and the R of STAR. So if you want to use language like first I did A, second I did B, that's your action, right? And then clearly articulate the results. What did you learn? Was your project successful? Was it a complete flop? I don't know. Tell me that information. That's a good way to go about an interview question.
Yeah, perfect. And then Emma, going to come to you for the second half of this question. Are there preferred words or phrases? And I think I kind of get what they're saying. How do they connect the job description with what they should specifically say to the recruiter in an interview, or maybe even one of the pre-recorded versions?
I think this depends on the job description you're reading. So, if you're reading a job description and it says, like, join a fast paced environment that has accelerated career growth, things like that, you can kind of allude to being interested to those types of things. I don't think like using those buzzwords really like rings a ton of bells for me in my head. I tend not to think about it. I'm just like, okay, this person like recognizes our statement, recognizes our mission, things like that. In my personal AI, the AI that we use, we don't get any like bonus points for using like exact language from our job description. Or really from our website. It's more about your general understanding and how you like explain all of your answers. So I would say those could definitely be good resources. Of course, review your job description, review your company's mission statement, but don't think you need to go crazy over using certain words.
Okay, I think that's great because that takes the pressure off a little bit. Just answer
Right. Yeah,
honesty.
exactly.
Perfect. Okay. All right, we had another question come through about multiple offers. So Rachel, I'm going to come back to you because I know you said this was top of mind for you. How do you navigate a situation where you've accepted an offer and then you receive another offer at that point?
Great question. That is a tough but great situation to be in ultimately. And kudos to anybody who's in that situation. What I will say is this really comes down to that transparency, being transparent from the get-go with the recruiters that you're working with. If you are interviewing elsewhere or you're really open to other opportunities still interviewing elsewhere and you're accepting an offer, you have to make the decision that is best for you. Now, I will warn you, I do feel that there aren't necessarily like repercussions for taking an offer, accepting it, and then, revoking that acceptance, but it can leave like a bad taste in that company's mouth. I mean, at the end of the day, because they have invested in the whole process of recruiting you, selecting you, they've got you on board. So if you are revoking that, it does, I think, have some I can't speak today, implications, but I would just say make the ultimate decision of what role is going to be the best fit for you too. If you're accepting an offer just based on, well, I need to have a position, and then, down the road another offer comes in that's better, that kind of stinks. It does happen, but think about the offer that you're accepting. Make sure you're fully interested in that company, the people, the role, the future before taking the time to accept. So don't feel that you just have to accept based on a timeline or things like that. If you're not 100%, don't necessarily accept it so that you aren't really in this situation. If you are still interviewing out there and you feel another position might be a better fit. It's risky. I know it probably feels like a lose-lose situation, but it's a win-win situation either way. So that's why I would say just be as transparent as possible throughout the process and really accept the role that you are truly most interested in for your career at the end of the day.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it's a tough situation and we want to respect all parties, but ultimately this isn't something that should be taken lightly. It really is a big impact on the company that you've signed with. So again, please come talk to us, be transparent, let us know what's going on. We can help you navigate. I would say a good rule of thumb is if you feel like, okay, I'm going to keep interviewing after this because this isn't what I want, you probably shouldn't be accepting the role in the first place. So again, you don't have to turn anything down until you come talk to us. We can talk you through this is it. This is a great offer. Or yeah, maybe there's something that's a better fit. So yeah, just make sure that you're again not taking it lightly and understanding the impact to all parties. So thanks, Rachel, for your perspective there. All right, Emma, I'm coming to you for this one. What are your tips for multiple interviews with different people? So you have multiple rounds and you're talking with different people. Should you be saying the same thing? Should you switch it up? What should students consider there?
So I think my overall tips are make sure you remember every single interviewer's name. I think it is kind of like a red flag when we're like, oh, who else have you spoken with? And you're like, oh, their name is escaping me. Like, I don't really remember. So definitely just review everyone's name before you go into interviews with other people. I think it's okay to share similar stories with interviewer over interviewer. Um, Typically, like that's what I've done in the process. I know that's what other candidates have done in the process. And you can't really make up new stories as you go along. Typically, the behavioral questions are going to mirror each other. If anything, they're just going to get a little bit more in depth. So I think even if your interviewers do chat with one another and talk about, oh, did you hear about this experience? It will be kind of understood like, yes, they only have so many experiences to talk about, and your interviewers in those more final rounds will just get a little bit more info from you because typically those are going to be longer rounds. So I would say no need to like fabricate stories, no need to list out 50 instances of when you've done different things, just so you can like keep it interesting for your interviewers. Work with what you know, and I think like you're good to go with that.
Awesome. And you touched on something. I just want to do a follow-up. How long should answers be? And I know that's kind of a vague question, but it's something
I
we hear a
know.
lot. How long should they be talking? What do you guys want to hear? How much
Yeah.
detail?
I mean, it's so hard to put a time limit on it. I think you should follow the STAR method, and what aligns with that should probably be the range of how long your answer is. I think a lot of people, when they get nervous, tend to get extremely long-winded. So I would say for those questions that like you anticipate to be a little bit of a longer answer, maybe practice them a couple of times before your interview and just see like, okay, am I sounding crazy? Am I sounding super long-winded here? And just try to like scale it back. Your interviewer will ask follow-up questions if they need more information from you. So I think keep things like around a minute. If they ask about something that maybe took up like 2 years of your college career, you can take a little bit more time to kind of walk us through that. But no need to get too long winded, is what I think.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And Krista, I know you do a lot of mock interviews, so I'm just going to ask for similar question. Where do you see students? What kinds of questions do you see them maybe being too short and or too long-winded?
Yeah, the longer ones typically are the soft skills. So show me about a time when, right? But typically the students know when they're talking too much. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm just going on and on. If that's the case, that should be a really clear thing for you to know. You need to practice and you need to organize your answers better. If you're being long-winded in your answers, that might just be due to lack of confidence and lack of knowing your experiences from your heart in order to really know off the top of your head how your experiences relate to the job. So if you're really confident in your experiences and you practice them, then you can be concise and relevant.
That's 100%. And I think too, if you are worried about being long-winded, something Krista said earlier was that you should be focusing on the action and the results part of your of your answer. If you spend forever on the S, the situation, well, my roommate broke his leg and so I couldn't get to the group project, you're going to be out of time by the time you get to your actions and results. So really do try to focus on those pieces Krista was talking about, your task, your action, and the results. Don't forget that part as well. All right. Rachel, I think early on you mentioned something about a phone screen. Could you talk a little bit more about what is a phone screen, number one, and how should students be prepared? Is it more casual, more formal? What does that look like?
Great question. I will say it does differ upon the industry, the company you're interviewing with, and all of that. I'll speak to my current experience, but also my prior experience. So, working in industry, whenever I would review candidates for opportunities, my initial selection process would be to go through phone screens with the top candidates that have applied. My initial phone screen, it would probably last like 15 to 20 minutes or so, and it was a quick talking high level about the role, why you're interested in the company, talking about salary, that time frame of when you could start, just diving into a little bit more of your work history or school experience, leadership, all of that. So kind of, I'd say formal in terms of the questions that are being asked, but really trying to get to know you and why you're truly interested in this role to see if we'd want to take you from there and move you to being reviewed by that like hiring manager. Now, I will say here at PwC, it kind of depends on the practice, for example. So, for a lot of our accounting roles, so audit, tax, digital assurance, and transparency, we have business recruiters who, once you've applied, they may reach out to you to confirm, hey, are you most interested in working in DC? Because I know you listed DC and New York, and we don't have any opportunities in New York. So I just want to make sure. So it's really like doubling down on some details about your application before inviting you to the formal interview process. So it really is just kind of that first step in the process. Now, I will say for a lot of our advisory types of roles, we don't do the initial phone screens, but you go directly into the interview process with individuals in the practice. So it kind of depends on the company, the position, but that's just my experience.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, when we say casual too, anytime we're talking about casual, it's still formal if you're
Yeah,
interviewing, so always be prepared for that.
just be personable and be yourself, be
Yes,
confident. And, we're interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing us. So always remember that even from the phone screen on.
perfect. Okay. Let's see, another question, Emma, for you. What kinds of research should they be doing on the company and their interviewer? They don't want to seem creepy, but like what kinds of things should they know before going into an interview?
Well, I think your first level of research is, of course, the company's website. That's super easy. Anyone can access that. So I would look at their mission statement. If they have a tab that maybe is like about us, what we do, those are really great to look at. When I was interviewing at AlphaSights, I was looking at YouTube videos too. I think those are a good resource if your company does put them out, like a day in the life at AlphaSights, a day in the life at PwC. Those are just some good extra resources. I think I understand the like being creepy part with like knowing too much about your interviewer. I was always kind of like treading lightly with that as well. I think it's totally fine to look at their LinkedIn, look at what university they graduated from, maybe what they majored in, and you can kind of like draw some parallels to yourself there. That could be good to add on at the end of your interview, or like, oh, I saw you majored in this. How does it apply to this role? Do you feel like you're using some of those things in this role? Things like that are great. I know AlphaSights does send out interview prep directly to the candidates when they're selected for a first round interview. So anything that the company is sending out to you, absolutely look at and you don't have to memorize it, but I would look at it in great detail because you will be asked questions directly based off of the things that they've provided for you. So definitely be wary of that. I think there is a large number of candidates that I speak with who are like, oh, I didn't see that. I didn't take a look at that attachment. Always just make sure that when you're getting emails from your recruiter, from the company that you're interviewing with, make sure there's no attachments on those emails because you will get asked about what was included in there.
Awesome. Okay. And then you touched on, remembering what they've shared. What's the policy on taking notes and bringing notes into an interview?
Yeah. I think that taking notes is absolutely fine. I in first round interviews, that's all that I conduct. So I do like a half-hour behavioral interview when I'm giving candidates like a little bit more info on our company. If they maybe fumble on one of the questions, I'm like, oh, I can tell you a little bit more about this. Like, no worries at all. If they're taking notes there, I don't mind. I think bringing notes to the interview is fine when it's things like related to yourself and maybe like little pointers on what the company does. I wouldn't have anything like totally written out. It is just like very apparent that you are reading something. So I would try to have most things from top of mind. If you do need maybe like a post-it note just to have as like a security blanket, though, I get it.
Okay, perfect. All right. Let's see, I have a couple more questions. Rachel, how would you recommend answering the question? Tell me about a time when you faced a conflict or had, conflict or something like that without speaking ill of other parties.
And that is going to come up. And I'm sure everybody has faced a conflict at some point in their education or at a job, anything like that. It's really, once again, using that STAR method. I think explaining the context of the situation, what challenge you dealt with, what was the conflict, and then the steps you took and the outcome. I mean, truly, those you have to kind of walk through it step by step. You just want to turn it into more of a positive. So don't throw someone under the bus. Don't talk badly about another student that you had to work with and they didn't do any of the project and you had to take it all on, and make it positive. Like, hey, for example, like with that situation, we had a group project and some people weren't working on the project, so I had to take on a little bit more of the project, but then it opened up opportunities where I got to learn a little bit more about said subject. Turn it positive, and then you're not necessarily talking ill about others. Don't talk ill about other like companies. Do not name drop, none of that. That looks very bad when you're interviewing. So keep it kind of general, but really I'd say turn it into a positive in a way. It's not a fun situation no matter what, but you're going to run into conflicts, and whether that be in the past or in the future role that you're interviewing for. So it's a lot about how a company wants to know how you're going to handle these situations when they come up. So are you going to turn it into a positive, or are you going to dwell on that negative situation?
Perfect. Yeah, and I love the don't name drop aspect of that. So good.
People do. So yes, don't do that.
All right, guys, we have two more planned questions. So if you are a student attendee and you have a question that's right at your fingertips, go ahead and throw it in the chat and we'll make sure to get to it. Krista, I'm going to come to you for this one. How would you recommend answering the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, I think a lot of students are scared of this question because they think employers want them to know exactly where they're going to be in 5 years. No one knows where they're going to be in 5 years, so that isn't the case. Employers want to see more of a direction instead of a rigid plan. So I would frame your answer around skill development and impact. So you could say, in 5 years, I hope to have deepened my expertise in financial analysis and be in a role where I can contribute to strategic decision making. So it's being vague, but it's mentioning something that you're interested in, wanting to grow. It shows your ambition and alignment within that specific field without implying that you're going to have the job and immediately move on. So that's a great way to go about that.
Yeah, I love that. You're kind of like keeping it vague, but also very much aligning it with the role you're interviewing for. So if you imagine your future in 5 years, if you were to get this job, kind of show that skill growth that you would anticipate. That's perfect. All right, last one. I'm going to go to Rachel for this one. What is your opinion on thank you notes post interview?
That's a great question. I know that's a hot topic because in the past, thank you notes were a huge thing. And I will say, even in the communications that I have with students, I don't get many thank you notes. So when I do, it actually really stands out to me. And I don't think it has to be a full follow-up email with 10 paragraphs. No, make it short and sweet. 1 to 3 sentences is totally fine. I personally, and it depends on the person that you're speaking with. I think it's great to, after you've spoken with somebody, add them on LinkedIn. And whenever you're sending that connect request, there's a note option there. Send a thank you for your time. It was great learning about X, Y, and Z. I look forward to connecting more in the future. A quick snippet like that, right in that note, send that connect request. So then the person that you've interviewed with sees that. It kind of allows you to stay connected, and it's a little bit of a thank you note as well. So doesn't need to be anything super formal, just a little something. It goes a long way since I don't personally see it as much as I had, say, 5 years ago. So I'd highly recommend it.
Okay, interesting. Emma, do you get a lot of thank you notes? Do you like when students send you those?
I do not get a lot either. And I had thought that it was a really big thing. I guess maybe when I was interviewing for roles, like I was just always told, like by my career center, by even like my parents, like definitely sends a thank you, like thank them for their time. So yeah, I don't see very many. For context, I do 6 interviews a day typically, and I think I say like 4 a week. So a very small percentage.
Wow,
I think
okay.
it's a good habit to get into, though. Just as soon as you're done with the interview, draft up an email, send it like an hour or two later. Or what Rachel said, sending that LinkedIn connect is always great. And then even if you don't get the role, you're still connected with that recruiter. If things do open up down the line and you're still interested, then that's just a really good resource too. So definitely get into the habit of it.
Okay, yeah, great tip. And I mean, obviously, guys, easy way to stand out if a lot of your peers
Yeah.
aren't doing this. So, all right, well, that wraps up our questions. I do want to do just give you all a chance to share a little bit about what you're hiring for now or in the future and kind of what that process looks like. So, Emma, I'm going to start with you if you wouldn't mind sharing a little.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for a little bit of context, AlphaSights is an information services firm. We like to say that we're kind of adjacent to both consulting and sales. Basically, we work with clients in private equity consulting, capital markets, and they will come to us when they have a gap in knowledge they're looking to get filled. And then we will do outreach on experts in an aligned field to pair the two parties together and help our clients make better informed business decisions. So I am currently recruiting for our 2026 summer internship and our 2026 full-time client service associate roles. Basically, you are getting direct client experience very early in your career. So, really, really great opportunity for people who want to be client facing, want to be in a fast paced environment. A little bit about our interview process. I know I hinted before that we do have people send in their resume and then those 2 additional exercises, one behavioral assessment, one AI conversation tool. After that, we'll take a look at your application, see if we think you're going to be a really great fit. If we do believe that, then we will progress you to a first round 30-minute behavioral interview with a member of our recruiting team. If that goes well, then round 2 is a case study round with a manager on our client service team. So you'll kind of get like an example client brief and you'll get to do like the actual job. So you can see, okay, is this like outreach and is this like example something that I'm interested in? So really good for both parties. And then if that goes well, third and final round is an hour-long behavioral round with one of our vice presidents, so a member of our regional leadership team. We try to keep our whole process very streamlined and quick. So we're looking at anywhere from like 4 to 5 weeks from application to offer, candidates like being all the way through the process. So
Awesome. And Emma, remind me where these positions for next summer are located.
yes, so we are in New York and we are in San Francisco. Our New York office is really, really big. Our San Francisco office is a little bit smaller, only deals with our private equity clients, so has more of a startup feel, but really can't go wrong. Culture is amazing everywhere, and a really great opportunity for early career talent.
Awesome. Yeah, those are some great locations for
Yes.
summer roles. Awesome. Okay. And Rachel.
Awesome. So for very similar companies in a way. So a lot of what we do is very similar, but PwC, we are a professional services firm, like I had mentioned, one of the big four accounting firms all across the United States and honestly the world at this point too, and growing. But we hire into accounting roles and also consulting types of roles. So primarily right now, we recently passed our application deadline, which was September 16th. So that was for a lot of our accounting related summer 2027 internships and then our consulting related summer 2026 internship and full-time opportunities. Now, I will say we do have opportunities come up here and there, just depending on the practices. They may work with a client and get a new job in that we need a lot of additional help for, and then we'll post something on kind of like off cycle in a way too. So definitely keep tabs on our career site with those types of things, but audit, tax, digital assurance and transparency, which is IT audit. We hire a lot into those roles on a rolling basis as well. So you'll see those probably posted a lot more often on our career site, just depending on the needs. So, like I said, it can always change, but once again, application process is submitting an application with the resume, no cover letter. Don't take your time in completing a cover letter. That is one of the questions I get all the time. Please save yourself the time and anxiety of having to create that. Just submit your resume, fill out the application with us. You have that assessment, the behavioral assessment that's sent to you, and then if selected for an interview process, our process is pretty streamlined as well. It's two back-to-back virtual interviews with individuals in the practice that you're interviewing for. Now, most accounting related roles are going to be two behavioral interviews, and then most of the consulting roles will entail one behavioral interview and one case interview. So it kind of depends on the practice, and those case interviews are really an on-the-spot case of something, say that interviewer had worked on a client project that they've worked on. So you kind of get to some exposure into what you'd actually be working on if selected for that role and hired into that role. So that's kind of the overview of our interview process, but always connect with me, like on LinkedIn, email me if you don't have my contact information on my LinkedIn, and would be happy to help with what to apply to as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so, so much for all of your advice. It was so helpful. Hope all of our students got some good tips and tricks here. And as Rachel mentioned, these are some great people to connect with on LinkedIn and follow. So, all right. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a good evening and have a good one.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Bye-bye.